finally happened. The Final Fantasy VII Remake demo finally launched. And, well, it was about as big as you'd expect, right? But you all probably know that by now. I'm sure anyone who owns a PS4 and is excited about this game has already played it. Personally, I was incredibly impressed by it. There are a few issues I had with the demo. I will go over it a little, but I want to stress this right out the gate. This new video is not in particular about the demo per se. It's not about, it's definitely not about my impressions of the demo. I will go into that a little bit, but there are plenty of videos out there on the internet, of people with reviews and impressions and all that. I'm sure who will do a much better job of that than I, so I recommend you just go look for those instead. We've seen a dozen of them already, right? So I'm instead going to talk about something a little different. I'm going to talk about something that the demo brought to my mind that I think has been on a lot of people's minds lately, but something that I kind of wanted to discuss and bring to the forefront, right? Real quick, before I get into this topic regarding the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I do feel it's important to give my brief thoughts on the demo itself. I will say a little bit about that, right? Like I said, I was pretty blown away. The demo lasts about an hour long. It is the first chapter of the game. For those who have played the original 7, it is the segment in which, the opening segment in which Cloud and the members of Avalanche try to destroy the Mako reactor. You all pretty much know what I'm talking about, right? It is that, and it has been taken to the nth degree, right? The demo lasts about an hour first try, I guess. If you watch all the cutscenes, probably about an hour, which is pretty neat considering, you can beat that segment incredibly fast, obviously, in the original. I guess that could be a good or bad thing depending on your take, and we'll get into that. But brief thoughts, right? The gameplay I thought was pretty darn solid. Quite fun. I never found myself dreading battles. I actually was kind of excited to get into them. Cloud's hits have so much weight to them. There's this awesome new Punisher mode. Again, this is not a review, so I'm not going to talk much about it. But there's some really cool stuff you can do. There's some settings I recommend you use. I'll get into that way at the end. But yeah, gameplay solid. Obviously, visually, absolutely phenomenal, stellar. I was just sitting there, just in awe, jaw dropped, looking at the metal on Cloud's shoulder guard and the Buster Sword, right? And I was like, I can't believe how good this looks. I mean, obviously, we all know by now that they are pretty much going all out with this remake. It's about as remake as remakes get, and I'm sure the most ambitious remake we've ever seen in all of gaming history. And in that regard, that brings me to the presentation. It's no surprise, obviously, that the presentation in the demo is stellar given what we've seen so far and all the trailers and everything. Everyone knows that that's where they're really, really hitting a home run here. But personally, I was so impressed by things I didn't even expect in this demo. Things like editing, camera angle, just cinematic things. I personally think that the most impressive thing about this demo that gives us a good idea for what 7 could be like, the 7 remake could be like, is just how cinematic all of it feels. It is, in particular, I'll use the intro as an example, right? There's something about as the music just completely swells and you see the title screen and it just explodes, and then it pans down over Midgar with intersplicing shots of the train tracks, and you just got that, oh my god, here we go, it's really here kind of feeling. But even without the nostalgia factor, it's just, you play this demo, right? I'm just going to talk about it in a way where I assume everyone's played it, who's probably watched this, or has a good idea of it at least. You watch this intro and you're like, it truly just feels like this grand start of an epic journey to come. You'll know what I mean when you play it, hopefully. It's difficult to explain, but there's something from the get-go, right out the gate, that is just screams ambition and just absolute, like, just scope to all of this, right? Oh my, and you're so pumped by the beginning, and it doesn't stop from there. You keep going, and there's all these new cutscenes, and just this really actually pretty well delivered exposition. Surprisingly, you know, you get things like the introduction to Cloud's character, who he is, why they're there, what are they doing, in some really, really neat new scenes. I personally, this was my favorite part about the demo, was just how much care and attention to detail was put into taking Final Fantasy VII's story and using the potential of modern technology and our understanding of how games can be nowadays to just push it into the stratosphere and make it into the full cinematic epic that it can be, right? I mean, it is just like some of these extra cutscenes just do so much to expand the narrative, and that is exactly like what I was hoping to see out of this. I was so smitten over that they're really taking all this ambition and their capabilities here and going ham with it. It's as big as you can possibly imagine. So big, in fact, that, as you all know, it's been split into multiple games. And that, my friends, brings us to more of the topic of today. While I do think that splitting the Final Fantasy Remake into multiple games has allowed it to basically blossom with this ambition, the likes of which we've never seen before, it does also raise the one super, super important question, and the one that I personally feel will define whether or not this remake in the end works. Will Final Fantasy VII's remake justify the fact that it is split into multiple parts? It's a question we've all been wondering, right? But it does deserve to be discussed. You can make the argument that this is all because it's just that ambitious, that they really want to put as much love and care into this as possible, and so they're not going to be able to do it in just one part. And so the idea is that they're just going to make this as big and epic as possible and use multiple parts to expand things that weren't maybe even touched upon in the original, right? The hope would, of course, be that in doing this, for me personally, I feel like the best way to get around, to go through this, is to use that extra time that we're getting, like taking an entire segment like Midgar and condensing it, or not condensing it, sorry, expanding it into, like, if I had to guess, like a 25-hour epic, because they said it'll be as long as a regular Final Fantasy game. Taking it into, like, that size, I would hope that the reason for doing so is justified by them doing things like expanding character personalities, furthering character development, perhaps characters that were undercooked in the original, like Jesse and Biggs, stuff like that. Stuff that I'm already absolutely seeing in this demo alone. Things like the relationship between Cloud and Barrett, their distrust for one another, just like really important stuff that can really add a lot of richness to the story. Maybe extra side quests that kind of give us a further idea of the life of Midgar and what a poisonous place it is, right? You can absolutely, to my mind, take the entire first 5-hour segment of Final Fantasy VII and expand it to the size of a normal game in a way that is completely beneficial for the overall story of 7. I believe you can. I believe you could. There's so much to work with, undercooked elements from the original. I love 7, but there's no doubt there were things in the game that could have been touched upon more or could have been enriched. And so far, I absolutely feel like this demo is proving that. That is what I'm most impressed by so far. But it's super, super, super important that it continues to do so. Because on the other hand, I thought to myself, or they could do this, right? They realize that they can sell this as its own game, call it its own game, charge a full price. And what happens if their excuse for doing so is padding the story like crazy with mandatory story segments that end up meaning nothing to the plot, or even worse to my mind, changing elements of the plot solely for the sake of elongating it, right? Sorry, we've already seen some changes. If you play the demo, we've seen things like, oh, okay, it turns out that in this version of the game, the Shinra company actually destroys the reactor when it doesn't work the first time, obviously to really pin the blame on Avalanche and stuff. It's like, okay, that's interesting, but God hope, that it is actually beneficial for the plot in the end. They can do this. They can really screw up here. There's a big room to my mind for really screwing up, and I just think that this is the one thing 7 has to do right. The 7 remake has to do right. Is it has to not do that. It has to not look at this 25 hours and this full price tag as just and then be lazy about it, right? Or maybe not even be lazy, but be shady about it. And one might argue they've done so in the marketing, but I think the game speaks otherwise. Personally, I don't feel that they're on track to doing that, but there is a worry there. Personally, I feel the demo again proves that they're not doing that. I think the trailers seem like they're not doing that. In every way, I feel like they are taking the story of Midgar and just turning into more than it could ever have been, and that is what it needs to do. That, to my mind, even if the gameplay isn't stellar, they will have succeeded if they manage to turn 7, to justify 7 as this big multi-chapter epic, right? But there are some worries. So I guess we obviously know now that a character like Sephiroth, the main antagonist, is going to appear much earlier in this new version of the game. And there was a recent interview, I think it was even today or yesterday or something, where the director of the game was basically saying, oh yeah, Sephiroth's gonna appear much earlier now because everyone knows who Sephiroth is now. We don't need to do that thing in the original game where his appearance was teased and built up over time. And to me, that was the first big red flag, right? Because I'm but that really worked in the original game. Why change some major story beats based on elements that have nothing to do with the game itself? Based on things oh, everyone already knows who Sephiroth is. That could potentially really weaken the story if you think about it. I mean, when you play the original 7, I'm not a huge fan of Sephiroth, but I can't deny that the way they built up his appearance and slowly lead to it is really effective in the original. Hopefully they don't jeopardize that here. And I can't help but wonder that the reason they do so is, again, to add more that shouldn't be there, to elongate the plot, and basically for advertising reasons, because everyone loves Sephiroth. Both, in my opinion, terrible reasons for being able to sell your game into multi-part chapters that are worth full price. It is a worry. It's there. But hopefully that is not what we end up with. And I'm curious to hear everyone else's take on this. Do you think it's as important as I do? Do you think that kind of the make or break with the Final Fantasy VII Remake is whether or not it can justify being multi-part chapters? Because in the best case scenario, to my mind, I understand people complaining about this, absolutely. But I do think that if they do this right, we could end up with an ambitious undertaking in JRPG storytelling, the likes of which we've never seen before, right? Or not on this level, at least. when you think about it, it's like, okay, FF7, a much shorter story, is being transformed into this absolutely sprawling epic that spans multiple parts. If you do it right, because I believe that the characters and the world of 7 have enough room to grow. If you do it right, it could just blow the original out of the water. You could work on things that weren't even touched upon in the original, like I said. I mean, you see what I mean, hopefully. It has the potential to be absolutely phenomenal in that regard, in taking, like, actually meeting its potential completely in a way that we never could have dreamed of. Hopefully they do it right. We don't have much longer to wait. I was super impressed by the demo. I have a little bit of that worry, and I firmly believe that that will be the difference between a game that really delivers upon the end, or one that kind of feels more like kind of like a sellout, right? I personally wouldn't put it past Square to see this as, oh, we can totally con people and sell a full price game and split this into multiple chapters and make people play, whatever, 180 by the end of it. I didn't do the math, but maybe that's it. I could see it personally. I wouldn't put it past it, but I think this is the key reason for that I have so much hope right now, is that I believe the game is saying anything otherwise. Like, it is not saying that at all. The game in itself, when you're playing the game itself, it doesn't feel like that at all, at least to me so far. I know other people have played longer, have played more of the game, so they probably have a different opinion. It all just depends. Can it justify this extra length? I guess we'll find out. If you enjoyed the video and you want to hear me blab more about FF7 or cover it when the game comes out or what have you, be sure to like if you want, subscribe, all that jazz. I cannot wait to talk more about this game. It is my most anticipated game in like the past 10 years. I've played the demo 6 times already. 6 times. I did. Oh God, it's hopefully this isn't a case of too good to be true. I guess we'll find out. Thank you so much for watching. Give me your take below and have a great day. Bye bye.